The mountain village of Aveline was the sort of place that rarely appeared on maps. Tucked high in the hills, surrounded by dense forests and narrow valleys, it was easy to miss unless someone already knew the way. Travelers heading toward the larger towns preferred the newer roads to the south, leaving the old mountain path almost forgotten. That suited the people of Aveline just fine. They had never wanted to be the center of attention. Life moved slowly there. The villagers woke with the sunrise, tended their fields, looked after their sheep, and gathered in the square each evening before returning home for supper. Seasons mattered more than politics, and harvests mattered more than the affairs of kings. Most families had lived in the valley for generations. Grandparents could point to the same orchards their own grandparents had planted, and children grew up believing that the world ended somewhere beyond the blue mountains on the horizon. Among the villagers was an elderly teacher named Aldrin. Long before settling in Aveline, he had worked in monastery libraries where he copied manuscripts by hand and studied old chronicles from across the kingdom. He knew more about the country's history than anyone else in the village, though he rarely spoke about it unless someone asked. The children loved visiting his small stone house beside the church. While other adults told stories about mythical beasts or wandering spirits, Aldrin preferred talking about ordinary people, road builders, shepherds, blacksmiths, and farmers. He believed history was built by countless nameless men and women whose lives were rarely written down. Kings may change the course of a kingdom, he often said with a smile, but it's ordinary people who keep it standing. Most evenings ended the same way. The church bell echoed softly across the valley. Smoke drifted from chimneys. Families gathered around wooden tables lit by candles, sharing fresh bread, vegetable stew, and whatever stories the day had brought. It was a peaceful existence, perhaps too peaceful to imagine that anything extraordinary could ever happen there. Late one autumn, dark clouds gathered over the mountains much earlier than usual. By sunset, the wind had begun to howl through the pine forests. Before midnight, the storm had become one of the worst anyone could remember. Rain hammered the rooftops. Thunder rolled across the valley with enough force to rattle wooden shutters. The narrow mountain road disappeared beneath rushing water, and even the village dogs refused to leave their shelters. Only Thomas, the village watchman, remained outside. Wrapped in a heavy wool cloak and carrying an oil lantern, he made his usual rounds through the rain. It wasn't a dangerous job most nights, but storms had a way of knocking down trees or washing away parts of the road, and someone always needed to check. Just before dawn, as the rain finally began to ease, Thomas reached the old stone bridge at the entrance to the valley. His lantern caught the outline of a horse standing perfectly still. The animal looked exhausted. Its coat was soaked from the storm, and its saddle was decorated with fine leather and silver buckles, unlike anything Thomas had ever seen. Then he noticed someone lying on the ground beside him. For a moment, he thought the man was dead. He hurried forward, knelt beside him, and placed 2 fingers against his neck. A pulse, weak but steady. The stranger's cloak had been torn across one shoulder, revealing a deep wound that had bled heavily before the rain washed most of it away. His hands were rough enough to suggest long days on horseback, yet the quality of his boots and clothing spoke of wealth. Even covered in mud, they were clearly made by master craftsmen. Without wasting another second, Thomas ran back toward the village. Within minutes, several men returned with a wooden cart, while Marta, the village healer, carried her satchel of herbs and bandages. No one asked who the stranger was. At that moment, it didn't matter. In Aveline, helping someone in need came before asking questions. The injured traveler was carried into the church, where the thick stone walls held the warmth better than any cottage. For the next several hours, Marta worked quietly, cleaning the wounds and changing blood-soaked bandages, while the others waited outside. When she finally stepped into the morning light, everyone looked at her with the same question. "He's alive," she said. "There are no broken bones, but he has lost a great deal of blood. Whoever attacked him meant to leave him for dead." The villagers exchanged uneasy glances. Violence was almost unheard of in these mountains. A wounded traveler was unusual enough. A wounded traveler carrying expensive equipment was something else entirely. Later that afternoon, Aldrin entered the church to check on the unconscious man. Near the bedside rested a small bundle containing the traveler's belongings: a broken dagger, a leather water flask, a weathered traveling cloak. Nothing remarkable. Then he noticed a silver ring that had slipped from one of the pockets. He picked it up carefully. Engraved on its face was the image of a crowned lion. Aldrin's expression changed at once. He had seen that symbol before, not in person, but in old royal records copied many years earlier. It belonged to the House of Armand, the royal family. He slowly placed the ring back where he had found it. Perhaps it was a coincidence. Perhaps not. Before leaving, he noticed one final item tucked inside the traveler's satchel: a leather case sealed with dark red wax. The seal carried the same crowned lion. He didn't open it. Whatever message lay inside clearly wasn't meant for him. That evening, Thomas found Aldrin standing outside the church, watching the sun disappear behind the mountains. "You've been unusually quiet today," Thomas said. Aldrin smiled faintly. Sometimes silence is wiser than guessing. "You think he's important?" "I think," Aldrin replied after a pause, "he has spent the last several days trying very hard not to be found." 3 days passed before the stranger regained consciousness. The first thing he saw was sunlight filtering through the church windows. The second was Aldrin sitting nearby, reading an old manuscript. "You've been asleep for quite some time," the old teacher said, closing the book. The traveler tried to sit up, but immediately winced. "I wouldn't recommend that just yet," Aldrin said gently. After taking a slow breath, the traveler asked, "Where am I?" "A village called Aveline." "I don't know it." "Very few people do." The stranger managed a tired smile. "Then perhaps I was fortunate." He remained silent for a while before looking toward the wooden chair where his belongings had been placed. "My satchel." "It's untouched," Aldrin replied. "So is the sealed letter." The man looked relieved. "You didn't open it?" "No." Another quiet moment passed. Then the traveler studied Aldrin's face. "You recognized the ring, didn't you?" Aldrin didn't answer immediately. Instead, he looked out the window toward the peaceful valley where children were already playing beneath the autumn sun. Finally, he spoke. "I've spent most of my life reading history." The traveler nodded slowly. "Then you already know who I am." Aldrin met his eyes. "I believe I do." The man leaned back against the pillow and let out a long, tired breath. "My name is Adrian." He paused, almost as if saying the words aloud carried a weight of their own. "I am the king of this kingdom, and if the men who were chasing me discover that I survived, they won't stop until they find me." For the rest of that morning, the church remained unusually quiet. Outside, life in Aveline carried on as it always had. Farmers led their animals into the fields, children chased one another through the square, and the village baker pulled fresh loaves from his stone oven. No one outside the church knew that the man resting inside was the king. Aldrin intended to keep it that way. He closed the wooden door behind him before pulling a chair closer to Adrian's bed. "I won't ask why you were being hunted," he said calmly. "Not yet, but I need to know one thing." The king looked at him. "Can the danger reach this village?" Adrian didn't answer immediately. Instead, he stared at the ceiling, choosing his words carefully. "I hope not." Aldrin smiled faintly. "That's not the answer I asked." The king sighed. "No." Aldrin folded his hands. "Tell me the truth." After a long silence, Adrian finally nodded, "Yes." The room became still. "I left the capital 6 days ago with 12 royal guards," the king explained. We weren't traveling as a royal procession. Only a handful of people knew where we were going. What happened? We were betrayed. He spoke without anger, almost as if he had repeated the story many times in his own mind. They attacked us before sunrise while we were crossing a narrow pass. Whoever planned it knew exactly where we would be. And your guards. They stayed behind so I could escape. His voice grew quieter. I don't think any of them survived. Aldrin looked down. He had copied enough history books to know that kingdoms often changed because of decisions made in quiet places like mountain passes rather than on famous battlefields. Who wants you dead? Adrian gave a tired smile. If I knew that with certainty, this conversation wouldn't be necessary. That afternoon, the village council gathered inside the old meeting hall. Only 6 people attended: Aldrin, Marta, Tomas, the blacksmith, Rowan, the miller, Elias, and Father Bernard, the village priest. No one else was invited. When Aldrin quietly revealed the stranger's identity, the room fell silent. Rowan was the first to speak. The king? Aldrin nodded. I believe so. You believe? I've seen the royal seal before. Father Bernard added softly, and I recognized him myself. The blacksmith leaned back in disbelief. Then soldiers will come looking. Perhaps. And if they do? Nobody answered. Finally, Marta broke the silence. We're talking about an injured man. Before he's a king, he's our patient. The others nodded. In a village like Aveline, compassion usually came before politics. Still, compassion could also be dangerous. For nearly a week, Adrian remained inside the church while his wounds slowly healed. He proved to be nothing like the king most villagers had imagined. He never expected servants. He thanked Marta every time she changed his bandages. He insisted on eating the same bread and vegetable soup everyone else ate. One afternoon, Tomas found him sitting outside beneath an old apple tree. You should be resting. Adrian smiled. I've spent enough time lying in bed. The watchman sat beside him. After several minutes, Tomas asked, Is being king very different than what people imagine? Adrian laughed quietly. Much lonelier. Tomas was surprised. The king continued, When you're young, people teach you how to rule. They rarely teach you who to trust. As Adrian recovered, he slowly became part of village life. He watched children learning to read with Aldrin. He helped Rowan sharpen farming tools inside the forge. He carried buckets of water despite Marta repeatedly telling him not to overwork himself. The villagers noticed something unusual. He listened. Whenever someone spoke, Adrian paid attention, not because they were important, but because they were people. One evening, while helping Elias repair a broken water wheel, the miller asked, Your Majesty. Adrian interrupted with a smile. Please, just Adrian. Elias laughed. Very well. He paused before asking, Do kings ever wish they had been born ordinary? Adrian looked toward the river. More than you'd think. Days turned into weeks. Autumn slowly painted the surrounding forests with shades of gold and deep red. The king's wounds healed well. His strength returned, but one question remained unanswered. Why had he come this way? One late evening, Adrian finally invited Aldrin into the church library. He placed the sealed leather case on the wooden table between them. For several moments, neither man spoke. Then Adrian carefully broke the red wax seal. Inside were several folded parchments, old maps, letters, and one document written in elegant handwriting. Aldrin noticed the royal seal at the bottom. This, Adrian said quietly, is why men are trying to kill me. The old teacher adjusted his spectacles. What is it? My father's final decree. Aldrin frowned. "I thought King Edmund died years ago." "He did." "Then why wasn't this made public?" "Because he changed his mind shortly before his death." He gently unfolded the document. "My father discovered evidence that several powerful nobles had stolen land from hundreds of farming villages over many decades." Aldrin's eyes widened. "The decree orders every piece of that land returned. And if it becomes official, the wealthiest families in the kingdom would lose fortunes." Aldrin nodded. "Some would lose titles. Others," he paused, "would lose everything." The room fell silent. Suddenly, everything made sense. The ambush, the betrayal, the pursuit. This wasn't simply an attempt to kill a king. Someone wanted these documents to disappear forever. Aldrin looked back at the parchment. "So only you know?" Adrian shook his head. "My father, my late chancellor, and now," he looked directly at Aldrin, "you." Outside, the church bell echoed softly through the valley as evening settled. The peaceful village had no idea that beneath its quiet roofs rested documents capable of changing the future of an entire kingdom. And somewhere beyond the mountains, the men searching for those documents had not yet given up. The first frost arrived a few days later. When the villagers opened their doors that morning, the fields shimmered beneath a thin layer of white, and every rooftop seemed to glow in the pale light of dawn. It was the kind of morning that usually filled Aveline with quiet satisfaction. Winter was approaching, the harvest had been good, and the village had enough food to last until spring. But inside the church, no one felt completely at ease. King Adrian spent much of his time studying the maps that had been hidden inside the leather case. They weren't military maps or battle plans. Instead, they marked villages, farms, monasteries, and old estates across the kingdom. Small notes filled the margins in his father's careful handwriting. Aldrin noticed one detail immediately. "This isn't simply a decree," he said. Adrian nodded. "No, it's evidence." Each page contained records proving that powerful nobles had quietly claimed land that never belonged to them. Over the years, official documents had disappeared, witnesses had died, and boundaries had been redrawn until no one questioned who owned what anymore. Except the late king had questioned it. For nearly 10 years, he had secretly collected proof. Before he could announce his decision, he fell ill. Only Adrian knew where the documents had been hidden. "If these papers reach the royal council," Adrian said quietly, "thousands of farming families could reclaim the land that was taken from them. And if they never reach the capital?" The king folded the parchment carefully. "Then history will remember a lie as if it were the truth." That afternoon, Tomas returned from checking the mountain road. His expression told everyone something was wrong before he spoke a single word. "I found fresh horseshoe prints." Rowan looked up from repairing a wagon wheel. "Travelers?" Tomas shook his head. "Too many." "How many?" "At least 8 horses." The village fell silent. Very few groups traveled through those mountains together. 8 mounted men almost always meant soldiers. Father Bernard quietly asked, "Did they come this way?" "I don't know. They turned south at the fork, but they were searching for something." The council met again that evening. This time the conversation felt heavier. "They'll eventually search every village," Rowan said. "And when they arrive?" No one answered. Finally, Marta looked toward Adrian. "How many people know these documents still exist?" The king thought carefully. "Very few. But whoever organized the attack believes I escaped with them. And they're right." He nodded once. "Yes." Silence settled across the room. Then Elias, who rarely spoke during meetings, cleared his throat. Perhaps we're asking the wrong question. Everyone looked toward him. We keep asking how to protect the king. He leaned forward. But perhaps we should be asking how to protect what he's carrying. The room became very still. For the first time, everyone understood. The real treasure wasn't Adrian, it was the truth inside those pages. Over the next several days, life in Aveline appeared completely normal. The baker opened before sunrise, children continued their lessons, farmers prepared firewood for winter. Anyone passing through the village would have seen nothing unusual. That was exactly what the council wanted. Only a handful of people knew the truth. The fewer who knew, the safer everyone would be. Adrian did his best to help wherever he could. He repaired fences, carried sacks of grain, even spent an afternoon helping an elderly widow chop firewood, despite protests that a king shouldn't be swinging an axe. The woman simply laughed. "In this village," she said, "everyone works." For the first time in many months, Adrian smiled without forcing it. Late one evening, Aldrin found the king standing alone outside the church. The sky was unusually clear. Thousands of stars stretched across the mountains. "You can't sleep either?" Aldrin asked. Adrian shook his head. "I keep thinking about my father." The old teacher waited. "When I was a boy, I thought being king meant giving orders. And now? Now I know it mostly means carrying burdens no one else can see." They stood quietly for a while. Then Adrian asked the question that surprised Aldrin. "If something happens to me," the old teacher interrupted immediately, "it won't. But if it does," he looked directly at Aldrin, "promise me those documents won't fall into the wrong hands." Aldrin didn't answer right away. Instead, he looked toward the church where generations of villagers had gathered for weddings, funerals, and harvest celebrations. "This village has survived because people here keep their word." He extended his hand. "You have my promise." The king shook it. Neither man realized that this simple handshake would shape Aveline's future for the next 5 centuries. 2 mornings after that, the village watch bell rang unexpectedly. Not once, but 3 times. Everyone stopped what they were doing. 3 bells meant strangers approaching. Tomas hurried into the square. "There are riders on the northern road." "How many?" 7. "And armed." Within minutes, the villagers gathered calmly. No panic, no shouting, just quiet concern. From the top of the hill, they watched the riders descend toward Aveline. Dark cloaks, well-trained horses, no banners, no royal colors. That was what troubled Adrian the most. Official soldiers always carried the king's standard. These men carried nothing. As the riders reached the village entrance, their leader removed his gloves and smiled politely. "We're looking for a traveler. Tall man, dark hair, injured shoulder. He may have passed this way." Father Bernard stepped forward before anyone else could answer. "I'm afraid you've come the wrong village." The stranger's smile never faded. "Have we?" His eyes slowly moved across the gathered villagers. Careful, patient, measuring every face. For one brief moment, his gaze rested on Adrian. Only for a heartbeat. Then it moved on. The stranger smiled again. "If you happen to see the man we're looking for." He reached into his saddlebag and placed a small leather pouch filled with silver on the ground. "There'll be plenty more where that came from." No one moved. No one reached for the money. The rider studied the villagers for another long moment. Then he nodded politely. "Thank you for your time." The 7 horsemen turned around and slowly rode back toward the mountain road. Only after they disappeared beyond the trees did anyone breathe normally again. Adrian looked to Tomas. They weren't soldiers. No, They were hunters. Aldrin quietly picked up the untouched pouch of silver from the road. He stared at it for a moment before placing it on the church steps. "Their greatest mistake," he said softly, "was believing every problem can be solved with money." From that day forward, the people of Aveline understood something they had only suspected before. The kingdom's secret had found to their quiet mountain village, and sooner or later, someone would return looking for it again. Winter settled over Aveline almost overnight. By the middle of December, the mountain paths had disappeared beneath fresh snow, and the forests stood silent under a blanket of white. The valley seemed farther from the rest of the kingdom than ever before. Travelers stopped coming altogether, and for several weeks, the only tracks on the old road belonged to the villagers themselves. It should have been the quietest season of the year. Instead, everyone lived with the same unspoken thought. The men who came looking for the king would return. No one knew when, only that they would. Adrian had recovered enough to walk without pain, but he no longer spent much time outside the church. He understood that the fewer people who saw him, the safer the village would be. Each morning he helped Aldrin organize the church library. The old teacher's collection surprised him. There were books copied by monks more than 200 years earlier, maps of forgotten trade routes, journals written by traveling pilgrims, and records of villages that no longer existed. One afternoon, Adrian picked up a faded manuscript. "Have you really read all of these?" Aldrin smiled. "Most of them." "And what have they taught you?" The old man thought for a moment before answering. That kingdoms rarely disappear because of one great disaster. Adrian looked at him with curiosity. They disappear little by little. One poor decision, one dishonest official, one forgotten promise. History changes quietly, long before anyone notices. The king closed the manuscript. "My father used to say something similar. He believed injustice grows slowly, and if no one stops it, it eventually becomes ordinary." A week before the winter festival, Tomas arrived at the church carrying a bundle wrapped in cloth. "I found this near the northern pass." Inside lay a broken arrow. Its black feathers immediately caught Adrian's attention. "I've seen these before." "Where?" Tomas asked. "The royal guard recovered arrows like this after several attacks along the eastern border. They weren't made by common bandits." Aldrin examined the arrow carefully. "There are no markings." "There wouldn't be," Adrian replied. "Whoever made them didn't want to be recognized."
A heavy silence settled over the council hall after Aldrin spoke. No one asked what he meant. The look on his face told them he had already begun forming a plan. Outside, snow drifted gently through the village square, softening every sound. It was difficult to imagine that 30 armed riders were somewhere beyond the mountains, slowly making their way toward Aveline. Father Bernard was the first to break the silence. "You have an idea?" Aldrin nodded. "Perhaps." Rowan frowned. "I don't like the sound of perhaps." "Neither do I," Aldrin admitted. "But certainty is a luxury we no longer have." He spread one of the old maps across the wooden table. Most of the villagers had seen it before. It showed the valley, the church, the old bridge, and the abandoned Roman road that disappeared into the forest. Then Aldrin pointed to a place no one paid much attention to anymore. Beneath the church, there is another room. Several people exchanged confused looks. Marta blinked. What room? The original foundation. The church standing today wasn't the first building on this hill. He traced his finger over the faded drawing. Nearly 300 years ago, a smaller stone chapel stood here. When the present church was built, the old foundation wasn't destroyed. It was sealed. Father Bernard looked surprised. I've served here for 12 years. No one ever told me that. Very few people knew. Aldrin smiled gently. I discovered it while restoring old records many years ago. The room grew quiet again. So, you're saying, Tomas began, there's a hidden chamber beneath the church? I believe so. Later that afternoon, Aldrin, Tomas, Rowan, and Adrian carried lanterns into the church cellar. The narrow staircase led beneath the main floor into a cool storage room where vegetables, candles, and barrels of grain were kept during winter. The walls were built from rough stone, blackened by centuries of smoke and damp air. At first glance, nothing seemed unusual. Then Aldrin stopped beside the far wall. He brushed away years of dust with his sleeve. A narrow crack appeared between two large stones. It should be here. Rowan pressed both hands against the wall. Nothing happened. Together, they pushed harder. For a moment, the stones refused to move. Then, with a deep grinding sound that echoed through the cellar, part of the wall slowly shifted inward. Cold air flowed from the darkness beyond. No one spoke. Even Adrian seemed astonished. They lifted their lanterns and stepped through the opening. The chamber beyond was small, barely large enough for 6 people to stand comfortably. There were no treasures, no golden relics, only a simple stone table and several empty wooden shelves. The room had clearly been built to protect something, or perhaps to hide it. Aldrin ran his hand across the table. It has remained untouched for centuries. Father Bernard whispered a quiet prayer. This place has been beneath us all this time. Later that evening, the council gathered again. Everyone agreed on one thing. If the king's documents were to survive, there was no safer place than the hidden chamber. Adrian carefully placed the leather case on the stone table. For several moments, he simply looked at it. Those papers represented years of his father's work, evidence collected at personal risk, proof that could restore justice to countless families. If these are lost, Adrian said softly, my father's final wish dies with them. Aldrin rested a hand on his shoulder. They won't be lost. They'll simply wait. The king smiled. History is patient. So are mountain villages. The following morning, the villagers prepared as though nothing unusual were happening. Children attended lessons. The bakery opened before sunrise. Smoke curled peacefully from every chimney. Anyone arriving in Aveline would have seen an ordinary winter morning. Only the council knew that beneath the church floor rested documents capable of changing the kingdom. Around noon, Tomas climbed the watch hill overlooking the northern pass. Within minutes, he saw them. Dark figures moving slowly through the snow. 1, 5, 10, 20, 30 riders, just as he had reported. They weren't rushing. They rode with confidence, certain they were close. Tomas hurried back to the village. They'll be here before sunset. No one panicked. Instead, every family quietly returned home. Doors were closed. Animals were brought into their barns. Children were told to stay inside without being frightened. Aveline became strangely calm.
As the afternoon light faded, the riders entered the valley. Their leader was the same man who had visited weeks earlier, only this time he wasn't smiling. His horse stopped in the center of the square. The villagers slowly emerged from their homes. Father Bernard stepped forward. "Welcome back." The stranger looked around. "I was hoping we'd meet again." His eyes swept across the crowd. "I've returned because I believe someone here has been dishonest with me." No one answered. He continued calmly. "A dangerous man passed through these mountains. He stole something that doesn't belong to him. We simply wish to recover it." Adrian stood hidden inside the church, watching through a narrow window. Every instinct told him to surrender. If he walked outside now, perhaps the village would be spared. As if sensing his thoughts, Aldrin quietly placed a hand on his arm. Not yet. Outside, the stranger dismounted. He walked slowly across the square until he stood only a few feet from Father Bernard. "I'll make this simple." He removed a leather pouch from his belt. It landed heavily on the ground. Gold coins. Far more money than most villagers would earn in years. "Tell me where he is. The gold is yours." Father Bernard didn't even look down. "I'm afraid we can't help you." The stranger sighed. "I was hoping for an easier conversation." He nodded toward his men. Within seconds, they spread through the village. Not violently, methodically. Barns, homes, the mill, the blacksmith's forge. Every building was searched. Cupboards opened, floors inspected, lofts examined. The villagers stood silently in the square, watching. Children clung to their parents. No one resisted. No one spoke. Nearly 2 hours passed. Finally, one rider returned. "Nothing." Another shook his head. "Nothing." A third reported the same. The leader's calm expression finally began to crack. He looked around once more. Then his eyes settled on the church. Without saying a word, he started walking towards it. Inside, Adrian took a slow breath. The hidden chamber lay directly beneath his feet. The documents were safely concealed. But if the strangers discovered the secret room, everything would be over. The church door creaked open. Boots echoed across the ancient stone floor. The leader stepped inside alone. He removed his gloves and looked around quietly, almost respectfully. Then his eyes met Adrian's. For several long seconds, neither man spoke. The stranger smiled, not with triumph, not with anger, with certainty. "So," he said softly, "I finally found the king."
Spring arrived slowly in the mountains. The snow lingered on the highest peaks long after the valleys had begun to turn green again. Small streams carried clear water down the hillsides, filling the old stone fountain in the village square. Apple trees blossomed, sheep returned to the open pastures, and for the first time in months, the sound of birds replaced the silence of winter. To anyone passing through Aveline, life appeared perfectly ordinary. The villagers hoped it would stay that way. Roland and his riders had disappeared nearly 6 weeks earlier. No one had seen them since. Still, Aldrin never allowed himself to believe the danger had passed. History had taught him that patience was often the greatest weapon of powerful people. One quiet afternoon, Adrian joined him outside the church. They sat beneath the old oak tree overlooking the valley, watching children chase one another through the fields. "I've been thinking," Adrian said. Aldrin smiled. "That usually means you've made a difficult decision." The king laughed softly. "I suppose it does." He looked toward the distant mountains.
I can't stay here forever." The words hung in the air. Aldrin had expected them eventually. "This village has become your home." "It has. But it isn't where I belong." He paused before continuing. "If my father trusted me with those documents, then I have a responsibility to finish what he started. And the risk? I know." Aldrin nodded slowly. "You've already decided." "I have." That evening, the council gathered one more time. Everyone understood why. Adrian stood before them, not as their king, but as the man they had lived beside for nearly half a year. "I owe all of you more than I can ever repay." "No," Marta interrupted gently. "You don't. We helped a man who needed help." The others nodded. Adrian smiled. "I've been welcomed into your homes. I've shared your tables. I've learned more about this kingdom in one village than I did during years inside the palace." Rowan folded his arms. "So, when are you leaving?" "In 3 days." The room became quiet. No one tried to stop him. Deep down, they all knew the time had come. Over the next few days, the villagers prepared supplies for the journey. Fresh bread, dried meat, cheese, warm blankets, a sturdy horse chosen from the village stable. It wasn't much by royal standards, but everything had been given willingly. On his final evening, Adrian walked through Aveline alone. He passed the blacksmith's forge where Rowan was finishing another day's work, the bakery where warm bread filled the air with its familiar smell, the school where Aldrin had spent decades teaching children to read. Nothing about the village was grand, yet every corner held memories he knew he would never forget. As the sun began to set, he stopped beside the old stone bridge where Tomas had first found him months earlier. "It almost feels like another lifetime," Adrian said. Tomas smiled. "You looked much worse that morning." "I probably did. You certainly complained less." They both laughed. Then Tomas grew serious. "If you ever become the kind of king who forgets villages like this, I'm giving you permission to come back and remind me." "Exactly." Before sunrise the next morning, the entire village gathered quietly near the church. No speeches had been planned, no ceremony, only a simple farewell. Father Bernard offered a short prayer for a safe journey. Marta handed Adrian a small leather pouch filled with dried herbs. "For the road," she said. "They won't solve every problem, but they may help with a few." Finally, Aldrin stepped forward. In his hands was a small book. Its leather cover had faded with age. "I copied this myself many years ago." Adrian opened it carefully. Inside were handwritten accounts of forgotten villages, ordinary families, and travelers whose names had almost disappeared from history. "Why give this to me?" "Because kings spend too much time reading about other kings," Aldrin smiled. "Read about ordinary people instead. They're the reason kingdoms survive." Adrian closed the book with great care. "I'll treasure it." Just as he prepared to leave, Aldrin stopped him. "There is one more thing." The old teacher disappeared into the church for a moment before returning with the leather case, the one containing the royal documents. Adrian stared at it. "I thought—" "I know," Aldrin interrupted. "We agreed they would remain hidden. They have, but they were never meant to stay hidden forever." He placed the case into Adrian's hands. "The time has come." The king accepted it slowly. Neither man spoke. Some promises were too important for unnecessary words. As Adrian mounted his horse, the morning sun rose above the mountains. He looked back one last time. The villagers stood together in the square, not bowing, not cheering, simply watching a friend begin a long journey home. He raised his hand in farewell, then turned toward the old mountain road. Within minutes, the trees hid him from view. The village became quiet once again. Days passed, then weeks. Life returned to its familiar rhythm. Children attended lessons. Farmers worked their fields. Travelers occasionally stopped for fresh water before continuing on their way. Nothing seemed different, except one thing. Whenever strangers asked whether anyone important had ever visited Aveline, the villagers always smiled politely. "No," they would answer. "Nothing remarkable has ever happened here." It became the village's favorite story, and perhaps its greatest secret. Far away, beyond the mountains, Adrian continued his journey toward the capital. The documents rested safely inside his saddlebag. For the first time since escaping the ambush, he felt something he hadn't experienced in many months: hope. He didn't know what awaited him at court. He didn't know who remained loyal or who had betrayed him. But he carried something stronger than fear. He carried the truth. And thanks to one quiet mountain village, that truth had survived. Adrian reached the capital just as the first signs of summer began to warm the countryside. From a distance, the city looked exactly as he remembered it. Its high stone walls still dominated the landscape. Church bells echoed across the rooftops, and merchants crowded the streets beyond the main gate. To anyone arriving for the first time, it appeared prosperous and peaceful. But Adrian noticed the differences immediately. There were more guards on the walls than before. Royal banners had been replaced in several places by the flags of influential noble families. Even the faces of the soldiers seemed unfamiliar. He pulled his hood lower and entered the city like an ordinary traveler. No trumpets announced his arrival, no crowds gathered. For the first time in his life, the king walked through his own capital unnoticed. Rather than riding directly to the palace, Adrian made his way to a small monastery on the eastern side of the city. It was one of the few places his father had trusted completely. An elderly monk named Brother Lucian opened the heavy wooden door. For a moment, he simply stared. Then his eyes filled with disbelief. "Your Majesty!" Adrian gently raised a hand. "Not so loudly." The old monk smiled. "I thought you were dead. So did many people." Adrian led him inside without another word. Only after the doors were closed did he ask the question that had weighed on him for months. What happened? Adrian placed the leather case carefully on the table. A very long story. For the next 2 hours, he described everything: the ambush, the escape, the mountain village, the people who risked everything to protect a man they believed was simply a wounded traveler. When he finished, Lucian remained silent for a long time. Finally, he said quietly, "Your father would have been proud of them." "So am I," Adrian replied. "They reminded me what a kingdom truly is." That evening, Lucian brought unexpected news. "The royal council is meeting tomorrow." Adrian looked up. "All of them?" "Nearly all." "Then tomorrow may be my only chance." He opened the leather case once again. The documents had survived rain, snow, months of hiding, and the long journey back to the capital. Now came the hardest part: getting people to believe them. The next morning, Adrian entered the royal palace through an old servant's passage he knew since childhood. The corridors felt strangely unfamiliar. Portraits of former kings still lined the walls, but many trusted advisors were gone. Some had retired, others had died. A few had simply disappeared from public life. He reached a narrow gallery overlooking the council chamber. Below, powerful nobles argued around a large oak table. Voices echoed through the room: taxes, trade, military spending. Not one person mentioned the missing king. Not one person spoke about the attack in the mountains. It was as though Adrian had already been erased from history. Lucian leaned closer. "Do you still wish to do this?" Adrian answered without hesitation, more than ever. The great doors opened. The conversation inside stopped instantly. Every face turned toward the entrance. For several seconds, no one spoke. One elderly council member slowly rose from his chair. "It can't be," another whispered. "The king." Shock spread across the chamber. Some looked relieved, others looked frightened. A few avoided meeting Adrian's eyes altogether. He walked calmly to the center of the room. "I apologize for arriving without ceremony," his voice echoed through the hall, "but I believe there are matters more important than tradition." No one interrupted him. Adrian placed the leather case on the council table. "I have returned with my father's final decree." The room changed immediately. Several nobles exchanged uneasy glances. One of them stood. "Your Majesty, we were informed those documents had been destroyed." Adrian looked directly at him. "You were informed incorrectly." He carefully unfolded the first parchment. One by one, the documents were placed before the council. Original land records, signed testimonies, royal seals, every piece of evidence his father had spent years collecting. The silence inside the chamber became almost overwhelming. Finally, the oldest judge present adjusted his spectacles and began reading. Several minutes passed, then he looked up. "The seals are genuine." Another official examined the handwriting. "So is the signature." A third compared the records with older archives. "They match." No one could deny what lay before them. The evidence was authentic. The weeks that followed were unlike anything the kingdom had seen in generations. Every morning, the great hall of justice filled before sunrise. Farmers arrived carrying faded deeds that had been passed down through their families for decades. Monks brought forgotten records from monastery archives. Elderly men and women came with stories they had heard from their grandparents, stories that had long been dismissed because no one believed they could ever be proven. Now, for the first time, there was hope that those stories might actually matter. The documents Adrian had protected did not solve every dispute, but they gave the judges something they had not possessed before. Evidence, carefully preserved records, royal orders signed by his father, maps that showed the original boundaries of villages before powerful nobles quietly expanded their estates. One by one, cases that had been ignored for years were reopened. Not everyone welcomed the change. Some noble families accepted the decisions with dignity, knowing that resisting the crown would only deepen the crisis. Others refused completely. Among them was Lord Edric. His estates stretched across 3 counties, and many of the lands named in the royal decree were now under his control. One afternoon, he requested a private audience with Adrian. The meeting took place in a modest study rather than the grand throne room. The king preferred it that way. When Adric entered, he bowed politely. "Your Majesty? Please, sit." For a few moments, neither man spoke. Finally, Edric broke the silence. "I've served the crown for nearly 30 years. I know. My family has remained loyal through wars, famine, and rebellion." Adrian nodded. "You have." Edric leaned forward. "Then why are you rewarding that loyalty by taking away our lands?" The king answered calmly. "I'm not taking what belongs to you. I'm returning what never did." The room became quiet. Edric looked toward the window. "You realize many families will never forgive you." Adrian smiled faintly. "My father told me something." "What was that?" "A king who fears being disliked usually stops doing what's right." Edric stood. "I hope history judges you kindly. I hope history judges us honestly." The noble bowed once more before leaving. Neither man expected to change the other's mind. As summer passed, the work continued. Surveyors traveled across the countryside measuring old boundaries. Judges listened to witnesses. Clerks copied thousands of pages of records. It was slow, sometimes frustrating, occasionally controversial, but little by little, villages began receiving official confirmation that lands lost generations earlier would finally be returned. For many families, it was the first piece of good news they had heard in years. One evening, Adrian stood in the palace gardens with a brother Lucian. The old monk watched workers planting young oak trees along the pathways. "You've been quieter lately," Lucian observed. "I've been thinking about Aveline." The monk smiled. "I suspected as much. I wonder how they're doing." "They're probably living exactly as they always have." Adrian laughed softly. "I hope so." After a moment he added, "Strange, isn't it?" "What is?" "I spent most of my life believing the palace was the heart of the kingdom." He looked across the gardens. "Now I'm not so sure." Lucian nodded. "The heart of any kingdom is wherever ordinary people choose to do the right thing." Late that autumn, Adrian made a decision that surprised everyone at court. Without announcing a royal procession, he left the capital with only 4 trusted guards. No banners, no musicians, no elaborate ceremony. His destination was known to only a handful of people. 5 days later, the familiar mountains appeared on the horizon. The narrow road wound through forests glowing with autumn colors. The old stone bridge came into view. Nothing had changed. The same river flowed beneath it. The same fields stretched across the valley. Children still played near the village square. For a moment, Adrian simply sat on horseback, taking in the peaceful scene. It felt less like visiting a village and more like coming home. Word spread quickly. The villagers gathered near the church, smiling as Adrian dismounted. Thomas was the first to greet him. "You look healthier than the last time I saw you." "I've had a good healer." Marta laughed. "I'll take that as a compliment." Rowan stepped forward and shook the king's hand as though greeting an old neighbor. "No speeches this time." "Agreed," Adrian replied. "I've had enough speeches to last a lifetime." Laughter spread through the crowd. For the rest of the day, there was no discussion of politics, no council meetings, no royal business. Only shared meals, familiar conversations, and stories about the harvest. As evening settled over Aveline, Adrian and Aldrin walked together to the hill overlooking the valley. The old teacher seemed older now. His beard had grown whiter. His steps were slower, but his eyes remained as thoughtful as ever. "You kept your promise," Aldrin said quietly. "I tried. You did more than try." They stood in comfortable silence for a while. Then Adrian reached into his satchel and removed a carefully folded parchment bearing the royal seal. "I've brought something for the village." Aldrin opened it slowly. It was a royal charter, signed by the king himself. From that day forward, Aveline would be recognized as a protected royal village. No noble family could claim its land. No taxes could be raised without the village council's agreement. Its forests, farms, and church would remain under the protection of the crown forever. Aldrin looked up, visibly moved. "This is too generous." Adrian shook his head. "No, it's the smallest debt I owe." The evening bell echoed softly across the valley. For the villagers, it sounded no different than it had the day before. Yet without seeking fame or reward, they had quietly secured not only their own future, but the future of countless families they would never meet.
Many years passed before Adrian returned to Aveline again. The kingdom had changed in ways few people could have imagined. The long disputes over land slowly came to an end. Not every decision pleased everyone, and not every family recovered what had been lost,
But the worst injustices were finally acknowledged. New records were written, honest surveyors replaced corrupt officials, and the royal courts became far more careful about protecting the rights of ordinary people. It wasn't a perfect kingdom. No kingdom ever was, but it had become a fairer one. As for Adrian, he grew older with every passing season. The young man who had once arrived in Aveline wounded, exhausted, and uncertain gradually became known as a thoughtful ruler who preferred listening before speaking. People who met him often remarked that he spent more time visiting villages than hosting lavish ceremonies at the palace. Those who knew him best understood why. Some of the greatest lessons of his life had not been learned inside a royal court. They have been learned in a forgotten mountain village where strangers chose kindness over fear. Aldrin also grew older. His eyesight weakened, and his hands were no longer steady enough to copy manuscripts for hours at a time. Before retiring from teaching, he asked each of his students to remember one lesson above all others. History isn't only made by famous people, he would tell them. If you live honestly, keep your promises, and help others when it's difficult, you may never appear in a history book, but you will still become part of history. The children rarely understood those words at the time. Years later, many of them would. One autumn afternoon, nearly 20 years after Adrian had first arrived in Aveline, a small group of riders appeared on the old mountain road. There were no royal banners, no musicians, no soldiers marching in perfect formation, only 5 travelers. At their head rode an older man with streaks of gray in his dark hair. The moment Thomas saw him crossing the stone bridge, he smiled. "You took your time." Adrian laughed as he climbed down from his horse. "I promised I'd return. And you kept your word, as did all of you." The village had changed very little. A few new cottages stood near the stream. The church roof had been repaired. Young trees planted years earlier now cast long shadows across the square. Children who had once studied under Aldrin had become parents themselves. Life had continued exactly as it should. That evening, the villagers gathered for a simple meal outside the church. There was fresh bread, roasted vegetables, warm soup, and plenty of laughter. No one treated Adrian like a distant king. He was simply an old friend who happened to wear a crown. As the stars appeared above the valley, Adrian slipped away from the gathering and walked toward the churchyard. He found Aldrin sitting beneath the old oak tree. The teacher was now well into his 80s. His beard had turned completely white, and he leaned on a carved walking stick. "I wondered when you'd escape the celebration," said Aldrin with a smile. "You know me too well. I've had 20 years to practice." They laughed together. For a while, neither spoke. The silence between old friends never felt uncomfortable. Finally, Adrian said quietly, "Do you ever regret it?" Aldrin looked puzzled. "Regret what?" "The decision you made. You could have turned me away. You could have handed me over. The village would have avoided every danger." Aldrin gazed across the moonlit valley. "When I was a young man," he said slowly, "I believed the hardest choices in life were between right and wrong. And now? I've learned the hardest choices are usually between 2 difficult paths." He paused before continuing. "We didn't know what would happen. All we knew was what kind of people we wanted to be." Adrian nodded. "I've thought about that many times." The next morning, before leaving, Adrian asked to visit the old church one final time. Father Bernard had passed away several years earlier, and a younger priest now cared for the building. Together, Adrian and Aldrin walked down into the cellar. The hidden chamber was still there. The stone door opened with the same slow, grinding sound as it had all those years ago. Inside, the room was empty. Only the stone table remained. Adrian ran his hand across its worn surface. So many lives changed because of a room no one knew existed. Aldrin smiled. No, they changed because people chose to protect what was placed inside it. The king looked around one last time before the stone door was carefully closed again. This time, it wasn't hiding royal documents. It was preserving a memory. After Adrian's death many years later, historians wrote countless books about his reign. They praised his legal reforms. They described the land settlements that restored property to hundreds of villages. They wrote about his patience, his sense of justice, and his determination to complete the work his father had begun. But none of those official records mentioned Aveline. No royal chronicle recorded the names of Thomas, Marta, Rowan, Father Bernard, or Aldrin. To the outside world, they remained ordinary villagers, and perhaps they preferred it that way. Centuries later, when travelers passed through the mountains, they occasionally stopped in Aveline and admired its quiet beauty. Some noticed the unusually old church. Others commented on how peaceful the valley felt. A few asked whether anything important had ever happened there. The villagers would simply smile. Oh, nothing you would have heard about. Then they would change the subject and offer their guests a warm meal, just as their ancestors had done generations before. And so, the greatest secret Aveline ever kept was not the hidden chamber beneath the church. It wasn't the royal documents. It wasn't even the identity of the wounded traveler who had arrived one stormy morning. The village's greatest secret was something far simpler. It was the quiet belief that ordinary people, acting with honesty and courage, can shape history just as surely as kings. History remembers the names of rulers because they wore crowns, but sometimes the future is protected by people whose names are never written down. And perhaps that is the most peaceful lesson of all.